Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. And in response to America's Vice President J.D. Vance attacking Europe on free speech grounds, former Prime Minister John Major called out the rampant hypocrisy of Trumpists, especially given their support for the Russian government, which allows virtually no freedom of speech. But I could go even further because some of the biggest opponents of freedom of speech are the ones who keep banging on about it. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So the MAGA oligarchs are attacking Europe because of restrictions on hate speech and Russian propaganda by calling it an attack on freedom of speech. Now, here's the thing. There are some people who are sort of purists, absolutists on freedom of speech. They believe you should be able to say anything and that others should be able to say anything as well. Now, I don't agree. I think if someone says something which is untrue, which causes someone else to be attacked or lose their job or cause some other serious harm, then the right of a person to live their life in safety and dignity is more important than someone else's right to tell lies. But I have much more respect for people who live by their own rules, even if I don't agree with those rules. If someone really does believe in a very pure sense of freedom of speech, and they also defend other people's rights to those same freedoms, well, that is at least a genuine belief. But Donald Trump, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance, Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch, these are people who bang on about freedom of speech all the time, and they are some of the worst offenders for attacking freedom of speech. Look what's happening in America. Trump wants to ban anyone who isn't a committed MAGA supporter from holding any position in the federal government or civil service. They've bullied organisations into renaming the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. They've refused to allow critical journalists to White House briefings. They're even trying to remove judges who find against the government. How's that for freedom of speech champions? Of course, Trump's government are absolute amateurs. When the likes of Vance were attacking Europe for their moves to restrict Russian propaganda in their politics, he was standing with Russia. He was defending Russia. But John Major made some good points on that front. This is what he said. It's extremely odd to lecture Europe on the subject of free speech and democracy at the same time as they're cuddling Mr. Putin. In Mr. Putin's Russia, people who disagree with him disappear or die or flee the country or, on the statistically unlikely level, fall out of high windows somewhere in Moscow. And that's right. Russia has a pretty extreme way of shutting down criticism of the government. It's a year since Navalny died, was murdered. He was arrested because he was someone who might have beaten Putin in an election, arrested, thrown in prison and murdered. If you say something Putin doesn't like in Russia, you're either falling out of a window, being poisoned, possibly imprisoned for saying something he didn't like, or being blown up in a plane. But mostly the windows these days, because blowing up planes and even poisoning tea is quite expensive, and Russia has a lot of expenses right now. Windows are cheap. And whilst pointing out the raging hypocrisy of self-appointed freedom of speech champions actually doing more to attack freedom of speech than anyone, Major was more generally talking about the long-term consequences of what America was doing. Much in line with some of my own fears, he pointed out democracy is threatened from what he called an ugly nationalism, mostly from the intolerant right. He pointed out that if Russia can claim a win, China will take notice. And it's somewhat similar to, when you talk about something completely different, like, when I talk about how the BBC often fail in their duty to properly inform the public. And some people will say, we should cancel our licence fee, we should defund the BBC. And I will just say, well, something will take its place. Imagine what takes its place. Same with America. I mean, there's plenty of people in Europe and in the UK especially who will not mind at all if America falls from grace on the world stage. But you have to think to yourself, but who's going to fill the void? Nature abhors a vacuum. Who takes that place? It's not going to be Sweden. It's not going to be Switzerland. It's not going to be Ireland, right? It's not going to be anyone you approve of. He was... I also saw someone else make a disturbing remark, actually. So I forget who it was now. I think it might have been an American journalist. But anyway, yesterday I was talking about the ramifications of Trump claiming that he was above the law. But this person had an even more disturbing take on the quote. So the quote itself, to remind you, was, he who serves his country does not violate any law. Sorry, he who saves his country does not violate any law. Supposedly attributed to Napoleon. Now, my concern was how Trump uses this statement to justify doing whatever he likes, crushing all dissent, even in the courts, and on the basis of, the fact that he's saving the country so he can do what he likes. But this more disturbing interpretation of the statement goes like this. So Trump was perhaps not just using the statement for his own purposes. It might have been a little wink towards his armed supporters, that if they take action, they will escape justice by simply claiming they did it to save the country. So what if someone attacks an abortion clinic or a Democrat senator or a judge? Trump has just pardoned the January 6th insurrectionists. Police officers were murdered during the attack on Capitol Hill. People who murdered police officers got pardons. Is Trump telling them that if they murder in his name, he will protect them? If that's how some of the more extreme MAGA cultists take the meaning, America may be in very deep trouble. And Major was pointing out that if America acts unilaterally in the way Trump is doing, riding roughshod over the established international order, then what do we have? Russia, America, and then China. What if they all sort of do their own thing without any regard for global stability? What sort of world will that be if there is no superpower standing up for a rules-based order? In fact, China could actually end up being the relatively stable one. But China is not exactly a defender of Western values. It doesn't even pretend to be democratic, nor does it even pretend to give a shit about freedom of speech. They banned Animal Farm. And the hypocrisy is everywhere. Nigel Farage claims to be a champion of free speech, but he's the first one to talk about sacking people or imprisoning people because they believe something he doesn't, because they're woke. Elon Musk has used Twitter to amplify his own talking points and shut down dissenting views. When a lot of progressive people with large followings on Twitter moved to Blue Sky, they noticed with far smaller followings there that they were getting more reach on their posts on this smaller Blue Sky platform with these smaller following than they did on Twitter. They sort of suspected that Twitter was choking their posts. Now they had proof. Then there's Kemi Badenoch. So she's like Trump's understudy now. So far up Trump's arse that Farage is getting a bit claustrophobic. Whatever Trump or one of his minions says, she has to repeat almost immediately. So she's now banging on about freedom of speech. But it was her government which wanted people holding up protest signs to be arrested. It was her government who legislated to ban many forms of peaceful protest. It was her government who, like Trump, also excluded established journalists from government briefings. Whenever you see someone shouting really loudly about freedom of speech, it's very often someone who's doing all they can to suppress freedom of speech. Who was it who said, accuse the other side of that which you are guilty? Oh yeah, but sure, they're not copying the Nazis' homework, whatever you say. In reality, what they actually object to is restrictions on hate speech, their speech. Without hate speech, they'd have to engage the public on real policies, and their real policies are intended to crush the living standards of most of the people in their country. So the last thing they want to do is talk about real policies. Much better to say, yeah, you're going to be a lot poorer with us in charge, but we're going to make things even worse for the people we've convinced you to hate. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.